There we go. Okay, so I'm talking with Daniel Klein, who I would describe as a classical liberal scholar, which can mean two things. One is he's well versed in the literature of classical liberalism, and he's also a classical liberal himself.
Hmm.
Um, so he's also got various titles, including founder and editor of this Econ Journal Watch, which tries to keep mainstream economists honest, which is that's a Sisyphean task. Um, anyway, any other description you want to give of yourself before we
No,
go
no,
on?
it's fine.
Okay. Um, okay, so so you developed this sort of odd interest in the 2024 election and libertarians who feel like they should sit it out, and you don't agree. And I think the disagreement can boil down to two questions. This one question is, should classical liberals or libertarians uh, sort of favor the lesser of two evils in an election? That's one question. Generically, is that a good stance? And the other question is Donald Trump the lesser of two evils in this election? So, so with the first question, I guess, um, I think libertarians often sort of put their noses in the air on politics. I think I once saw David Friedman, Milton Friedman's son, and of course the anarcho-libertarian, wearing a pin that said, "I didn't vote." Uh, so he was so he was expressing obviously an opinion. And I think if I were to straw man that view, it would be that libertarians' job is to educate people on classical liberal principles, sort of create a climate in which classical liberalism can thrive. And you muddy the message when you get into the gutter with politicians. So what would you say to that?
I don't think it does necessarily muddy the message. You can give both messages. You can think one thing is best, call it A, and then there's B and C, and then you can say A is greater than B, which is greater than C. It's not that complicated. And all of that is consistent. So it doesn't undermine saying A is best. It's just not stopping at saying that A is best. And you shouldn't stop at A is best because in real life, we have this major battle between B and C. As much as people talk about the uniparty and so on, we do have electoral politics. We do have a two-party system. We do have two parties, and it's not simply not true that there's not a dime's worth of difference. There is a difference. And the Republicans, I think now clearly today are really quite clearly the lesser evil. I'm not saying they're good or anything. And so since B versus C remains very, very central to the discourse, to people's thinking, to activities, the formulation of issues and everything, there's no reason to just stop at saying A is best. A being kind of classical liberalism, Javier Milei, however you want to think of A. Um, Milton Friedman said this very clearly, by the way. First of all, he's one thing that he said is he says in an interview, 2005 interview, I quote Friedman, "I always say," so he's been saying this for a long time, "I am a Republican with a capital R and libertarian with a small L." And this fit his thinking. And previously he wrote that, look, economists shouldn't stop promoting what's really good, A, as it were, but there's no reason, and he said this explicitly, that if for some reason A is infeasible or can't be considered, to then go on and say, well, if you're only considering B and C, I think B is greater than C. And all those statements are mutually compatible, consistent, coherent, responsible, not shallow, avoiding shallow. And I would say accepting virtue, civic virtue, because we should care about avoiding the worst evil, C. And if B is sort of less good than A, then C is less good than A. And especially if it's a lot less good, C, we really should show virtue, responsibility to help avoid C. You know,
Okay.
Mordor is out there, Sauron, Saruman, the orcs, all those, what they call the Nazgul, all those bad people are there. And if the elves and the Ents and the dwarves and the humans and whatever else you got there fighting against Mordor don't coalesce, Mordor could win. And so we don't want Mordor to win.
Okay, so clearly, I mean, you said that, as long as there's a significant difference. I mean, if somebody said these, B and C are within the margin of error of each other, you might be a little bit,
Yeah.
may take a little different point of view. Okay, so before, this is a kind of a segue into the second question of,
Yeah.
is are Trump and the Republicans really, outside the margin of error different? 4 years ago, were you not in Sweden? Is that my memory correct?
I spent a
pandemic?
lot of time in Sweden, so I was certainly spending some time in Sweden 4 years ago. I don't know.
Because that's the pandemic just getting rolling.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was in Sweden in March of 2020, and my spring break turned into a summer vacation.
Okay, so and I gather that you still feel you felt at the time and still feel that Sweden did a better job of handling the pandemic than
Right.
Fauci and Birx and so on.
Yes.
So doesn't that affect your views of Mr. Trump?
Yeah, it does. And it's bad that he wasn't better on things COVID. I agree. But again, so he's less than A. Then the question is, how does he compare to C? And even on that issue, it seems to me that he kind of changed his footing after a couple of months. I'm no expert in this matter, but that's certainly my impression. And
He
Republicans,
never
go ahead.
really canned Fauci and Birx. He sort of, he
Yeah,
had within his orbit, I think, Scott Atlas, who took a
right.
more of a what an economist would consider a reasonable point of view,
Yeah.
but he didn't listen.
Yeah, I know, Arnold. B versus C, you tell me. I mean, do you think that C would have Scott Atlas in the White House? I don't think so.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's like we're disappointed in Trump. It's not like we'd be disappointed in Biden because we know that what the agenda is.
Yeah. Okay. And to take and sort of another sort of pushback take would be that Trump's signature issue is, I guess I would call it economic isolationism. Building the wall
Mhm.
along the border and raising tariffs, being tough economically on China and so on. That's his signature issue. That's certainly wouldn't be a libertarian signature issue. So you wouldn't say that a vote for Trump is expressing uh, expressing what what people recognize as libertarian issues, right?
Right.
They sort of in the so if there's a case for Trump on the libertarian side, it probably comes from something that was more in the background of sort of deregulation. Is that fair, or is there something else?
Well, I think a proper orientation on this question is to start with Republicans in general versus Democrats. And there's quite a bit of evidence which I think shows that they're better. They're not necessarily better in my classical liberal view, which is not sort of a strict libertarian principle view, by the way, but they're not necessarily better in my classical liberal view on every single issue, but on the preponderance, and I think quite clearly, so it's not a dime's worth of difference. And also I just think that like the trend of things, I think what's happened to the Democratic Party is striking and very, very bad. And so it's more true than ever that the Republicans are less evil than the Democrats. I know people dispute that, but I say that because I think the Democrats are really bad. Like I don't know, maybe the worst they've ever been.
What specific issues make you say that?
COVID, climate, ESG, DEI, weaponization, propaganda, censorship, foreign wars now, they can't, in my view, can't even, now I know we're going to disagree on this. I mean, people in our kind of general circles will disagree on some of these foreign policy calls. I, for one, am not favorable to Project Ukraine. And in my view, the Democrats are now much worse on that particular foreign policy matter and on that kind of approach in general. So I actually think the Republicans are now clearly better on that front. Immigration, of course, is a big one we also are going to disagree with. I disagree with some of my colleagues who are pro-open borders. I am generally favorable to liberalization of immigration, but I do not believe in uncontrolled mass immigration, and I think it's irresponsible to espouse open borders. Now, what to say
Just
about
out of curiosity,
Republican?
what makes that irresponsible? Let's put that on the table.
What would
What
make that
what ma
irresponsible?
yeah.
I think that in this day and age, an open borders will lead to really tremendous mass immigration. And you've got social cohesion, political stability, issues of a fundamental nature. I think that there are preconditions to a stable political order. And I don't think you get liberty without a stable political order. And that stuff kind of gets thrown into jeopardy. It's kind of a precautionary principle. I don't think we should be taking this risk of sort of undoing the whole coherence of, stable Western liberal democratic political orders. I see this in Sweden and in Europe with mass immigration, and we take a lot I think libertarians take a lot for granted in terms of the resilience and so on of liberal institutions, norms, traditions. And they don't understand, I think, how much it is a special emergence creation that could be lost forever.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't look like any of the Northern European countries that have had a lot of immigration in the last few years have become more libertarian as a result. That's or that they're
That's true. And they've also, a lot of them, reversed course without ever giving any thanks to the people who were calling for them to do so earlier. but this is just one issue, immigration. So, I mean, again, let's split the difference or whatever,
Yeah.
even if we put it aside, if I share screen,
Yeah, okay, let me make that possible.
I can just show you some basic Republican versus Democrat things. Just to kind of show that, is that viable now?
Not
Okay.
yet, hang on.
I mean, I'm sure people are acquainted with these things, but just to review them or speak to them. I don't know, is this working yet? Host disabled participant screen sharing. Do you know? I think you have to make me a co-host if
Which I
you
think I did. I think I
screen
just
share.
did.
Oh, I think now it's working. Okay, let's try this. And let's see here. All right, let me just try to move this down so I can see my tabs. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
If we go to Cato, this is the governors, and the lighter is the A and the darker is the F. And you can they don't have New York and Virginia graded. You can kind of see something there in terms of I think this is Cato as well, freedom in the 50 states. And if you look, I got a ranking here. This is the best, right? And then they do economic and personal freedom, and then these are the worst. And so I mean, that's evidence, right? Club for Growth, they have stuff that's pro-growth based on regulatory, fiscal, and so on. Here's the House people, and you see these names: Chip Roy, Andy Biggs, and so on. Jim Jordan. These are 100% on their issues that they consider sort of growth issues, and they're all ours, or all Republicans. And you go
By the way,
down,
can I just interrupt a second? As host,
I say,
can you tell if there are some participants that you could let in now that you're a host?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
If you look down at participants, sorry, in the um
Participants to this meeting.
yeah, can you add more? Are there people waiting to get in? Is my question. There might be people waiting to get in.
I don't know. I
Okay, all
don't see
right.
an
Never,
indic. Oh, 8 people entered the waiting room.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
there's people in a
So
waiting
it's
room.
so you can admit them because now you're the host.
Do I say
Just
you?
admit all, or maybe.
Oh, I see. I get you. Okay, sorry about that. I'm with you. Thanks. Good call.
Okay.
I think I did it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so anyhow, yeah. So this is
Okay.
House. So it's kind of striking. They have everybody here, and you see all these R's. This is going from the top to the bottom. Look, there's not a single D up here. Okay, there's not a
Yeah.
single D. We're into the 90%. Not a single D. These are all R's, not a single D yet. We're down into the 50s. Okay, so then it kind of falls apart down here, 60, 50%. And where's the first? This is the first D. She is 13%. Okay. There's actually a lexicographical ranking between R's and D's in this scoring. And it's really like a striking difference in average between the two, like super striking. And then you have all your D's. And look at this. Most of them have zero. Zero.
So this is saying they have never voted for what?
They've never voted like on the right side of this set of issues, this set of bills that the Club for Growth is counting as, I guess, pro-liberty or pro-economic freedom or pro-growth. That's the flavor of the thing. And you could accuse them of picking and choosing. I don't know if someone's made that criticism just, in order to make the Dems look really bad. But I don't see why you should think that this isn't what Dems really are. By the way, and they do the same then for the senators. And you see these people, and you have no one like these people, of course, in the Democrat Party at all. And then again, it's all ours. And I think it's also, yeah, it's also lexicographical in the sense that every R is above every D. There's independent here, but this is like falling down to 8%. So it's just incredibly striking. Now let me see here. There's other stuff here. There's stuff here. Well, that gets into the issue of the Libertarian Party, which I guess we could get into. I'm against the Libertarian Party because I think when they affect the outcome of an election, the effect is always to get the Democrat elected and hence reduce liberty, which is completely contrary to what the Libertarian Party pretends to be about. Libertarians like to think about being serious about unintended consequences and the consequences of action and facing up to trade-offs and reality. And they are the ones who pave the road to hell with their so-called good intentions.
Okay, can you, sorry, since you're the host, I'm gonna have to ask you to try to do the mute all trick, or you can make me the host and I'll.
Yeah, let me just see if there's anything else here in particular I wanted to show. This is the conversation that I commented on, which started this engagement between you and I. And then I did a piece on that. I guess I don't, and here at Powerline, which comments on David Bowes and Nick Gillespie, which you may have read. All right, so I'll stop being host.
Okay.
Well, at least stop sharing screen.
Well, so click on my name or my screen and click on the dots and say make host.
Done.
Okay. All right. So let me do this.
And let me say something else about not a dime's worth of difference notion. Anthony Downs had this model of a two-party system in which there's a tendency for the two parties to each garner 50% or exactly equal support. There's nothing in any of our logic which should tell us that the two parties, in other words, there's no Anthony Downs model which would predict that the two parties come out exactly equal in badness. There's nothing. There's no reason to think that nature would produce two things exactly equally bad.
Well,
And so
I thought the median voter theorem would say that, well, they'll both start to look like the median voter. So I think but I think
I don't think that's actually right. I think they're going to both try to they're both going to work for 50%. I mean, however they get to 50%. The two ice cream stores going to sell in the middle. I guess they do sell the same ice cream by assumption, but look, I see it as about cobbling together the 50%, and there's a 50%. There's a distribution in space on the beach with the ice cream sellers, and that distribution does go in like some are all the way on this side of the beach and some are all the way on that side of this beach. I mean, they don't actually have the same origins, the same basis for choosing the one or the other. So they're not the same product. And there's nothing predicting. And for someone to claim that they would be the same product, I think requires proof. Like the burden of proof would be on them, and there is no proof. And I think there's proof to the contrary.
Yeah, well, more recently, because of the primary systems, the median voter for a Democratic congressional district is very far to the left, and a median voter in a Republican district is reasonably far to the right. Let me throw, I just want to keep pushing back, not necessarily, not necessarily because I take this view. It looks like one argument you can make this year is what the public really wants is a strong president, somebody who conveys strength. And Biden, no matter what else he does, he seems to always convey weakness. So, he tells other countries don't, and they do. He doesn't look like he has any control of the border. There's a perception of a crime wave, even though I think statistically crime kind of dipped down more recently. So why would libertarians want to be on the side of getting somebody who's perceived as strong into the presidency?
Well, look, I just go back to what I'm saying, Arnold. I think you've got a Republican, you choose between a Republican administration or a Democrat administration. I don't even think that much in terms of the two particular guys. And I just don't think it's close now. I really don't.
Okay, then what will be the three worst things that the Democrats might do over the next 4 years? What's driving your worries?
Well, just more governmentalization on all fronts, regulatory state, fiscal expenditures, welfare state, just kind of the normal. I'm not sure there's, I mean, in terms of new things, kind of new things they're getting more into are things like surveillance, censorship, the foreign wars stuff. I think is very scary and kind of different. The attacks on free speech, the opposition to free speech. I mean, I think the Democratic Party has been wagged by, if you think of a distribution in the Democratic Party among members or voters of Democrat, having a distribution of virtue, at the tail, they'd have the least virtuous group, the most vice-oriented group. And I think that vicious tail is wagging the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And furthermore, I see the Democratic Party is now merging with the deep state. Like, I think the deep state is increasingly just sort of allied with or merged with, or teaming up with the Dem Party. And so this is just the end, this is really undermining the whole notion of rule of law and honest democracy and so forth. So, I mean, and then in terms of things they could do, I think stuff structurally about balance of power in terms of the party power and trying to make themselves a one party, make the US a one party state like California or like China. I think that would be on their agenda, even is on their agenda. Whether they would succeed, I don't know, but I would be worried about it.
Okay, well, let me give the rest of the participants a warning that they can ask some questions or have comments. Just either raise a virtual hand, or if you're on screen, raise an actual hand. I'll try to call on you. Yeah, I think I think since Obamacare, the view has been kind of a winner-take-all view of elections. This goes along with your concern that wanting to become a one-party state. That is, and up until Obamacare, I think every major piece of legislation was passed with some bipartisanship. Now that norm seems to have broken. Maybe somebody could argue with me. Maybe the Bush tax cuts, which maybe that they didn't have true bipartisan support. I don't remember that fight. I could be wrong on that one. I know certainly through Reagan, you needed bipartisan support because Congress was still heavily Democratic. Okay, does anyone wish to ask a question, raise a comment, a criticism? So, I guess, Dan, everyone just so strongly in agreement with you that you,
There's a couple other phrases that I think relate here, like never Trumper, like never whatever. Like that again it's like nonsensical. It's saying, oh no, B is terrible. B is so much worse than A. B is not libertarian, is not classical liberal, is not true to free markets. So never be, never be. It's like, well, you could get worse. I mean, you could get worse. So why are you saying it that way? There's A, B, and C, and in real life, it's B and C that is this live, central, important issue. And so to just punt on that issue is a lack of virtue. And then another one is unfit for office. These people love to say Trump is unfit. Okay, who else is unfit for office? Let's make a list. And what happens now that we have an election between two people who are unfit for office? What do you say? So I mean, there's these like really lame, pathetic, tropes that, and I don't know what's with the classical liberals and libertarians. I mean, I've speculated, hypothesized on this quite a bit. So we could talk about, why I even need to give this talk to people, because I don't think it's really that difficult or hard to see. But I think there's a great deal of denial out there among libertarians and classical liberals.
denial of what?
Denial of basically how much difference there is, and I think that's in large part because a lot of the professional classical liberals and libertarians are operating in environments, in ecosystems like academia, like the policy community, like the Beltway, like journalism, like foundations and philanthropy, that is so predominantly left, and you have to get on, be kind of complacent to that, and so they're actually, it's partly, you could say, almost a career thing, but also like an effectiveness thing. I think you need to, get on in career, and it's the real world that those circles are that way. So I can understand it, but I think people should be more self-conscious about these difficulties and not fall into the they basically the kind of thinking and mentalities that dominate in those spheres. As an academic and as someone in the Beltway, I have, some firsthand experience with this. So I think there's
Let me ask
that,
you,
but there's other things too. I think also they're concerned as libertarians about having to defend the lesser evil. In other words, having to make a case or take up the real matter of B versus C, and therefore being pushed beyond their simple principles and formulas, where they're not necessary, and they might embarrass themselves once they try to get into those greater depths. And then, kind of like someone who embarrasses himself after a couple of glasses of wine, he decides on teetotalerism, right? And so I see it as a bit of a teetotalerism, and again, a kind of a dodging of virtue.
well,
So those are some speculations. So I think people are actually kind of intimidated a great deal. I think they're actually in denial about being intimidated. I think we are all much more intimidated than we like admit to ourselves and talk about publicly. So I think that's a matter of denial. Go on.
well,
I'm sorry.
okay, so a couple of things. I forget. I read on, I think it was somebody's Substack recently saying that, effectively, I don't know if he was talking about conservatives in Britain or Republicans in the United States, that there really is no hope because they don't have the brain power to implement their policies. And I think someone like Brink Lindsay or Will Wilkinson, back when they were coining this phrase libertarianism, I think they took the view that their best chance for liberty was to uh, side with the left and persuade the left rather than try to um, win with the right. Do you think that is a viewpoint that's out there, and what would you
I'm
say
not
to it?
really necessarily against them attempting. I mean, I think Will in particular put out some discourse that I thought was wrongheaded. But I mean, I'm not necessarily against that kind of approach. Maybe Brink has done good, but still, at the end of the day, he should vote Republican.
Okay.
And if he's going to be frank and honest, which maybe he can't be, which I can respect, but in his frank and honest moments, maybe with his inner circle, he should be ready to like say plainly, the Republicans are the lesser evil.
Okay, so we do have a question. Steve, you wanna
Yeah,
see? Yeah,
can you hear me okay?
yeah.
Hi.
So I guess I'm a little confused by the need for me or anyone that you'd be talking to vote for a Trump, because I know I'm not mathematically going to determine that the outcome of the election. There's no chance. Why would I waste my time to throw a drop of water into the ocean that happens to be in Trump's ocean versus the Biden ocean? And then to think, well, what about advocacy? Should I waste my time and effort and dignity promoting one or the other and trying to persuade other people to vote one way or the other? And it goes kind of beyond just the embarrassment of, I don't know if I could rightfully advocate for that versus spend that time and those resources advocating for more libertarian policies and thinking and making good arguments in that sense. And I kind of think of like, what would Adam Smith's Impartial Spectator say about all of that?
I think that it's a very focal matter in our culture, in our social experience day to day, just as ordinary people in our private lives. To be encountering this issue or this question, let's say you were the decisive voter. Now we know you're not going to be, but let's say you were between Republican and Democrat, who would you pick? And that is just like a major focal thing. It's a touchstone for a lot of the political discussion around us. And even if you don't vote, it's not like I'm like urging you to vote, really. It seems like that's a conversation you want to be prepared for and participate in. It's just the way it really is out there. And so if you're going to participate in civic life, you've got to meet people at that focal place where that conversation is happening, where that discourse is happening. And so it's just like a very natural thing. Like, this is our town square. And, what do you say about it? Like, if you were decisive, and if you were to like try to help, or let's say you had some influence and you could kind of persuade people one way or the other, um, you know, I mean, how do the dwarves and the elves and the hobbits and everything beat Mordor? They pull together and eventually, we hope, push back Mordor. How does that happen? Well, how does one soldier, make a difference? He's just a drop in the ocean. But this is just part of the bigger drama, which we're all affected by, and which we're all thinking about and talking about. And so just in terms of like getting your own thinking about it more informed and making better sense, more virtuous, just seems to me like a live issue, even if fine on an election day, you don't actually go out and vote.
No, I get that. I'm just coming at it from the perspective of, it seems to me like it's kind of a waste of effort and maybe an undignified effort to ever be out there promoting Trump over Biden or vice versa, when I could be promoting a lot of other things that are a lot more worthwhile in terms of policy. And
It's
here's what you should.
fine.
Yeah, so you're back
I'm
to,
not-
to the first question. I started out with these two questions, should you make a big deal about the lesser evil in electoral politics? And then is Trump the lesser evil? And you're sort of saying, well, no, we shouldn't make as big a deal about the electoral politics. You're with the David Friedman saying, I'm not voted. Now I'm curious to see if I could get David Friedman on to see what the I'm not voting, what his defense of that would be, because it sounds like it isn't, that's not what Milton Friedman would say based on what the quote that Dan read from Milton.
I mean, again, if you look at my stuff, it's not like I'm saying, please, please go out and vote. I'm like criticizing, for example, Bose and Gillespie in that interview. I mean, it's people like that that have given life to the LP, and the LP has put Democrats in office ahead of Republicans. There's no question about that. And kind of in a way just tends to have this broad effect of kind of libertarians not really being part of the numbers in the Republican versus Democrat contest. So I'm trying to persuade them of like, no, don't support the LP. In fact, frown on the LP. And it could make differences, in how much liberty there is and how big government is.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Dan, and thank everybody. Let's see, where do I stop recording? There we go.